Hey, welcome back everyone. Taking a little break this time from the Ranger. That thing should be ready to go for summer as soon as summer gets here. So that thing's ready to go. But today we're going to be working on the Foxbody. I want to upgrade the gauge cluster in it. For the most part, it's got stock gauges in it, or gauge cluster. I did put white face gauges on it, which I'll show you here in a second. But I want to upgrade those to the Dakota Digital Resto 5.0 gauge cluster. I can kind of show you that right here. So this is the gauge cluster itself. Looks more stock. Obviously there's no white face gauges on it. But I think it looks a lot better than what I have in there now. And I didn't want to, Dakota Digital makes quite a few different gauge clusters you can get for the Foxbody. This is the one I like the most. I don't want a big screen on here. I like my analog gauges, or at least the look of them. But I think this will be a nice upgrade. Comes with a control box here that I got to hook all my wires up to. And this thing actually just has one connection on the back side. Kind of looks like a phone cable. But so I got those. Got the bunch of sensors I got to replace and some wiring to put in there. So we're going to get into that and kind of show you what I had. I got some of the dash and stuff apart already, just because I was messing around with it. But that's what I had before, basically stock gauges. I just have the white face installed in there. This style, what you basically did was you pulled all this apart and you just put a sticker over the top so it was white and instead of the black. They were fine. They're kind of, you know, it's good for the era, I guess. You know, I did this many years ago, so that was kind of the in thing back then. So went and put them on, and they liked them for a while, but I don't like how they're lit up. It's kind of sometimes hard to read, like at dusk or dawn, when it's not fully dark out. Sometimes they're hard to read, just because the whole thing kind of glows. It's not, I don't know, it's just easier. So, but one thing that you do is you pull these needles off to put that white face on there. So these aren't all 100% accurate. And one thing that I'm going to do here, before I get too far into this, is I want to take a picture of this. One thing, it's going to give me my mileage. It's also, I'm going to turn the key on so I know where all my gauges are set at. And just that way, when I, like the speedometer and the fuel gauge, you have to set that up in the programming to make sure they're accurate. So I want to make sure all that's where it was before. So one way of doing that is to take a picture of everything, and kind of gives you an idea overall everything was sitting at the needles and all that stuff. So we'll get into that, but you can see I got the bezel off, and that's just got 3 screws that hold it on. There's one here, and then there's one kind of down here that hold it on. But one thing too is you got to take there's a headlight switch that goes there, and then I think the 4-way and the rear defrost go on that one. Those are kind of a pain in the ass to get off. At least this one was. This one came out pretty decently. I can show you that. So this is a 4-way and the rear defrost, but you can see there's 2 tabs here on each side. This one's kind of behind it. This one broke off on me, but that one there. The headlight switch, like I said, the other side came off real nice. I just stuck the screwdriver into these slots here and popped them out, and this whole switch came out pretty decent. This one here was a pain in the butt, and part of that is because you can't wiggle it enough because of this brace in here. You can see that metal brace right there, and that's the 3rd screw that holds it on. But it kind of goes right up against the switch on that side, where this one doesn't have it. So it was kind of a pain. I had to wiggle this bezel around, kind of twist it around and stuff so I could get to the back side, just so I could somehow get those tabs off or get the wires off. So if you do this, just take your time, be patient with it. It might get a little frustrating, or maybe yours will come out easier, but mine were a pain. So next up here, we're going to get that gauge cluster out of there. Another thing too is I'm going to be taking a lot of this dash apart. and the interior, I should say. I want to pull the seats out, the center console's got to come out, some of the carpet I might have to roll back. Not necessarily for the gauges for the install, but I got another project coming up here after this one that I'm going to need all that stuff out too. So some of this won't necessarily be going back together once I'm all done, but for this video anyway, I'm just going to show you how I get the cluster replaced and all the sensors that gotta get replaced, and then kind of show you what it looks like. So to get the cluster out, there's just 4 screws that hold it on. You got one here, and one here down in this corner, and then the other one down here, so right there. So you got 4, and then you should be able to pull that loose. Now your speedometer cable is going to be on the back side, pretty much directly behind your speedometer. And one thing too with that mechanical speedometer, a lot of these Foxbody ones, you see that speedometer sit there and bounce around on you going down the road. Mine always kind of did it around 30 or 40 miles an hour. I think at one point I had replaced the cable, but they were kind of known for that. So hopefully the new gauges won't do any of that. But it is kind of a pain to get that released from the back side. Sometimes you can get right behind the gauge cluster here and pop it loose. Other times you got to go down through the column here, through the dash, and try and pry that off. It is kind of a pain, but there again, just take your time, and you'll eventually get it off. But it shouldn't be too hard to pop this out, and we'll see what we got going on behind there. One nice thing that I like about the new gauge cluster too is you're able to, because it's digital, as long as you're within the first 100 miles from when you hook everything up, you can adjust the odometer to whatever you want it. You can set it so wherever the old odometer was at, you can set it right from there, and then you can continue on from there. So that's really nice. I like that feature. But like I said, as long as you do it within the first 100 miles, you should be good. If you don't, it just counts from 100 on up, or past 100. So then you can't adjust it anymore. But that's a nice feature. So our gauge cluster is out. You can see there's 2 big connectors, one here and one here, that go to the gauge cluster. And this is your speedometer cable right there. You can see that's the plug-ins right there, so just be careful when you're pulling it out to get that. Also be careful not to wreck your circuit panel back here, your printed circuit I should say, and because you never know if you want to use this or sell this or whatever, but we'll hang on to this and kind of move on from here. But one thing too is there's a company called New Rad Solutions that actually makes a connector, a wiring harness for these connectors here, because you're supposed to kind of tap into these connectors for the new gauge because all your information comes into these two, so why not tap into them? And so they make an actual harness. I'm not 100% sure if that's what I'm going to do. I think I'm going to go a different route. I'm not going to try and cut these up, but I want to try and figure out how I can do it without having to buy that harness. But I think they sell it for 150 bucks or something, so it's not terribly overpriced, but if I can save that money, I want to save that money. So but we'll look into how we can get by with that. But all your information basically is here, and that'll get wired into your control box, and then come back up to the gauge cluster, which on the back has just got that one plug-in. So but if you do want to go that route, they do make one, just in case you ever want to go back to the stock gauge cluster. They do sell that. So they send this little plug along. This is for the speedometer cable. Basically there's the end of the speedometer cable right there. There's just a little clip and a speedometer sensor here that you got to pop loose, and the cable comes out, and then all you have to do is just take this plug and pop it in the same place. Just make sure that the O-ring is still in there, and go ahead and pop that right in there, and should be good to go there. So I know that obviously the gauge cluster is going to go here. So kind of my next step is to try and figure out where I'm going to put the control box. Not all these are going to have wires going to them, but there's going to be a fair amount running to this. And it'd be kind of nice if they all came to one side versus both sides, but I suppose there's only so much room you can put on here. The biggest one that I'm worried about is the Cat 5 cable that comes into here. It's obviously pretty stout, or I don't want to say bulky, but thick, where you can't bend it real sharp, where the rest of these wires, as soon as it comes out, you could bend it pretty sharp. So I've seen that some people will kind of mount them, up under here just above the pedal. I'm going to need the room down in here for something else. So one obvious spot could be right here, kind of behind the radio and the heat and heat controls, vent controls and stuff. There is room kind of to put it there. It would be easily accessible. And I think the wires and stuff, you could all kind of get in there. I don't know how I'd necessarily mount it there. I don't think it's going to move around really. So it'll just be kind of laying there, but obviously if I need to get to it, I could just pull it down, have enough length in the wires to pull it down, and it'd be fine. The other spot that I'm probably going to do it though is number one, because you can kind of see it here. If I put this, I got enough wires with the radio and everything else right there that I don't know if I want this sitting in there too. Typically from the outside you don't necessarily see it, but it doesn't take much just to kind of look down in there and you see a bunch of wires. So I'm thinking I'm going to go up here. There's quite a bit of open space kind of above the gas pedal here. And let me see if, I don't know if I can really show you, but there is a kind of a bolt hole on this little bracket in here where I can bolt it on. There's plenty of room for the cables and stuff to bend. Then I just leave enough length on there where I could pull it down to about here. And then I could easily get at them and everything. And then it's kind of up out of the way. You don't really see it. And I think that'll work. So that's what I'm going to try. Basically you can kind of see let me get in here. So this is behind the cluster, but that red bracket right there is where I want to try and mount it. So it's basically just going to be mounted up in there like that. And there's all kinds of room basically to get back in there. And then I just got one bolt that I kind of could mount at the bottom here. And right there. And I think that'll work. So, but I don't want to mount it up there yet. Obviously, I got to get all the wires hooked up. But at least I kind of know where my wires are going to run to and how much length I'm going to need to it. So now that I kind of know that that's where it's going to be mounted, I can start running all that. And I think I got it figured out how I'm going to secure everything to here rather than going with those harnesses or cutting, splicing wiring here. So I'll show you that in a bit. So I showed you that I disconnected the speedometer cable, the mechanical speedometer cable. But we still need a vehicle speed signal, which that sensor down below on transmission will still give us. It's just a matter of kind of finding that. The instructions do explain kind of where it's at on mine, which could be different between the years as far as the color wiring. So your speed signal kind of comes through the tunnel right about here, through a grommet. Kind of the harness runs kind of back along here and over here. And for mine, it's kind of the smallest. I got a bunch of other stuff here, but there's a small cable like this that all the signal wires are in. So I just kind of followed that to this connector here. So this is the connector. There is two other ones in here. Sorry if I can't show you there, but there's one there and then there's a black one right behind it. But for mine, it's supposed to be green and white. That's the one that comes from the transmission signal, or the sensor on the transmission. But on mine, mine turns to a gray with a black stripe here. So it goes from a green with white stripe to, there's actually two of them in here. They're both gray with a black stripe. Some of the other models, this stays green with white. So you just got to be aware of what year yours is. Mine is a 91. So I'll check and see where I'm going to tap into. I might pull the pin out of here and try and just solder something to it. And then put it back in there, just so I'm not cutting up all these. But we'll pull this connector apart here and try and figure that out. So that'll get us our speed signal. And that actually, I'll kind of show you here if we get maybe we'll get it right here. So the speed SND there, or speed, get that to focus a little bit. That's the terminal we got to go to with that wire once we splice into it. You have a speed plus and a speed negative. That's for if you have the Dakota Digital sensor on the transmission. Being I'm running the stock one, all I need to run is just the speed SND, basically the speed signal there. So that's the only wire I got to hook up. The positive and negative there I don't need to. And then also the speed out is if for some reason you're using other accessories that need a signal input, maybe like some radios will increase or decrease the volume because of the speed. So that's where you could hook that up to. Or if you have another ECM or something like on the engine or cruise control or something that wants a speed signal out, you would tap into that one. But for me, I'm just going to be that SND there. So we'll hook the VSS signal up to that, and then we should be good there. So here's a little trick that I like to do from time to time. So I was talking about the vehicle speed sensor here. I actually got the pin pulled out of that plug right there, right out of here. And you can see it right there. But instead of splicing these, it's a lot of times what I can do, let me move this a little bit. What you can do is, I don't know if you can see that or if it'll zoom in, but basically I take the wire and I just strip it, and sometimes you can open up this terminal and get that to slide in there and crimp it together just so it holds it. But a lot of times what I'll do is just solder it right to the terminal, and that way if you ever want to get rid of the wire, you can always just cut it right there and it's kind of back to normal. You're not necessarily splicing it anywhere, but you have to make sure that there's enough room in the cavity of the plug here so that all those wires will fit. But I think this will work. There's plenty of room in here for those 3 wires to fit in there, and basically it's just going to go up like the rest of them, and we'll get that soldered on real quick, and then we can get this plug back together and move on to the next connection or sensor. All right, I ended up finding these wires here in my big wiring bin here, the leftover wires and stuff. They actually must be for like a Metro pack or a weather pack. You can see they got the little seal on there for going into a connector, but it's just a flat spade terminal. I'm going to use these for tying in to the old harness instead of getting that new Rad Solutions wiring harness. So you can see I basically took the seal off. Kind of compare them there. Took the seal off, crimped it a little bit more, and then just put some heat shrink over the top there. What I'll end up doing, it's not necessarily made for this. I guess to have a much better, more professional way, I would get that new Rad Solutions kit. But so the stock gauge cluster is actually supposed to make contact on the backs or on the outside of here on this terminal, but you can stick it in the middle here through the terminal, and it basically compresses it. So it's going to go in like that, and then what I'll end up doing is it's basically taking this outside and pushing it in, and it's a real nice tight fit. And what I'll end up doing is just kind of taping that over the top of that so it's not having power there. But being everything is in here, I want to tap into this, so it's just a matter of kind of pushing these in there. I should have enough of them for all my wiring connections, so we'll just use these terminals, and I think that'll work. And I'll just make sure that they're not, the wires themselves aren't touching each other or anything like that, and we'll be fine. I know it's not ideal, but it'll work. So, all right, I've got most of my interior wires kind of hooked up to the control box here. Those are all just the wires that come from these 2 connectors. Let me see if I can get in here. So you got the left one here that I got kind of tied up off to the side. I couldn't put it behind the dash here. It's just too tight to get this in there. I suppose I could have cut this away, but I didn't want to. So I kind of zip tied it down because it won't sit flat behind the gauge pod or the gauge cluster. So I kind of taped it down where there's more room here, but you can see I just kind of had some tape around my wires here so they don't move, and it's zip tied so it's not going to wiggle around. The other connector is actually back here. Let me see if I can grab the light. You can see it's right there. And there was only 4 wires there, where this was 9 or something, 8 or 9 wires on this one. So that one I could tuck behind the dash, so it's out of the way. That should be good there. So I got all those wires hooked up. I still have more to go here. So like I said, I got all those hooked up down here. Plenty of wire. I'll get some of these tied up, or kind of the bundle tied up together. So it's a little bit neater there. But next I was going to mount the switch. This is a switch that Dakota Digital sends along. This is for programming or just kind of cycling through the digital screen on there. So it's got basically a 3-position switch, left, right, and off. And originally I was maybe going to replace one of these 3 switches with that one, because it's the same size and it would pop right in there. I'm actually thinking of maybe replacing these switches with similar ones like what I have in the Ranger, because I have my overdrive lockout, my line lock, and then I don't use this one yet. So I might replace those with those nicer ones, like I said, like I have in the Ranger. So this I'm going to try and mount under the dash here, and I think I found a good spot. There's just this little, there's a electrical device right on the back side here, and you can kind of see it there, that white box. And it's just kind of screwed on right here. But I got the 1 bolt out, and what I'm going to do is, let me turn the light here a little bit. I'm going to slide it kind of between the metal brace and the plastic of that bracket, like that, and then just run that 1 bolt through, and that should hold it just fine. And it'll fit right in there, but I'll slide it right in between here. And you do have to kind of elongate that hole just a little bit, just so it fits in there somewhat square. Otherwise it's kind of turned crooked, but as long as you don't care, it doesn't matter. You don't have to do that. But there's a few different spots you could do it. I almost thought about drilling the hole right here and mounting it right on the side here. Mostly it's if I ever want to remove this, then I have to figure out kind of how to pop that out of there. And either have to disconnect it from the control box or put some sort of connector there or something, so it's easily to take that out. Or I suppose you could just kind of screw it on the side there if you wanted to. I'm trying not to put as many holes in this stuff as I can, but so I thought that would just be a perfect spot right there. And then after that, I can start. I do have to, for the most part, you have kind of power and ground that you can grab out of these 2 connectors up here. And the one thing I don't have is I need constant power that I got to hook up. I'll probably hook up right out of the fuse panel here, and I'll have to get that hooked up. But after that, then I got to start hooking up all my sensors. So I'll have to run, let's see, oil pressure, coolant temp, and I think there's one more sensor that I got to run from the engine bay this way. Other than that, let's see. Well, I could probably read right on here. Yeah, because I got my fuel sender hooked up. Pretty much just the oil pressure and the water temp is the only ones I got to run from the outside. So other than that, they're getting pretty close here to getting everything wired up, so we can at least try it. But we'll get the switch mounted and we'll go on from there. All right, now I'm working on getting the coolant sensor and the oil pressure sensor installed. I just kind of trying to figure out which way I wanted to run the wires and stuff. The way it looks, I could either kind of, the oil pressure is down here, and the coolant sensor, if you can see, it's right there on top of the intake. And both of those factory wiring kind of runs up along the valley here, next to the valve cover, and then it goes into the wiring harness back here. Either I can kind of run it over here along the frame rail, kind of the fender, and then through the firewall, or kind of go the same way the factory stuff does. And I think I'm going to run them both up this way. There's 2 different cables. Here's one already I got kind of sitting in there. But I think I'm going to run them both up here. I don't think we should have any issues. Some of this wiring, you got to be careful, especially like the vehicle speed sensor wiring. They say not to have it running too close to the high electrical wires or high voltage stuff, because it could interfere with that. I don't think the sensors, the oil pressure and the coolant sensor, are going to matter too much, but I should be okay if I run them along here. I don't think the injectors are going to have any effect on them, because I do have some the Holley Terminator sensor is down here too, and I don't seem to have any issues with that. But down here, so I got the oil pressure sensor port down here. There's actually 3 ports. The factory one, I can show you this. This is a factory sensor. It's a sender, I guess. That's a factory sender. That's usually what it looks like. Yours will probably be a little different depending on your setup. But I have a port that feeds the supercharger here. So I have an oil supply running to here. Mine is not self-contained. So I got a constant supply here. So it's ported into there. And then I also have the factory sender, which was in there, and also the Holley terminator sensor. So I actually have 2 different oil pressure sensors in here, one for the Holley, one for the dash. I'm going to be leaving the factory wiring in here just because I don't want to have to tear up all the harnesses and redo all that. So if I ever want to go back, I can always, the wiring will be there and I can always put it back the way it was. But so I think like I said, I think I'll run both wires up along here, along the valve cover, and I'll just follow that harness. And then I can kind of show you here. I got some of the coolant drain too, so I can do the coolant sensor. So, all right, so you might be able to see, where's a good angle here? Maybe no good angle here. But right here, this brass T is where my sensors are. You can kind of see the Holley one here sticking out. And then, I don't know if you can see maybe that's better. So you have the T-fitting here. This is a Holley sensor. And it's actually teed here back a little bit further. Let me see if I can get up in there. You can maybe see I got the pipe coming out the side of the block. And then you have a T-fitting. One goes to the supercharger, and then it's teed off to another T. And that's where I have the Holley sensor and this other sensor that I'm going to be putting in there. One thing that I'm looking at here is, let me see if I can get up in there. There's too many wires, too many hoses. But one of my issues here is I'm trying to figure out how to run this sensor. So it's supposed to kind of stick straight out like that, the way the other one did. But the way it's sticking out, and then also once you get the harness put on the end of here, it sticks out pretty close to where the belt is. It clears and everything. But you have the supercharger belt, and then you also have the regular water pump belt and all that other stuff, alternator belt. I'm just worried that if the belt ever pops off, I don't need it taking out the wiring for that. So I might just point it, I found this elbow here. So I might just point it straight down, and then I can just tie the wiring right to it, and it should be out of the way of everything. So I think that's what I'll do. I'll end up just pointing it straight down versus forward. And then I'll just make a loop for the connector there too. All right, a little tip that I like to use, instead of the Teflon tape or the pipe dope, when you put these pipe fittings together, is I'll just actually use blue Loctite. You can kind of wipe it clean, and I haven't had any issues with really them leaking. I think it's just easier to work with. The tape is a real pain in the butt, trying to wrap that up and get around the threads, and the pipe dope is kind of messy, and I don't know, it looks kind of gaudy or whatever on there if you put a lot of it on. So I use Loctite, and it seems to work great. So just a little tip for you guys. All right, next up is the temperature sender here. You can see I got a brass adapter in there. That's the coolant sensor, temp sensor. So got that installed, and just a matter of putting this in and getting that wired up, and we should be good to go there. And I'm going to be running both of them. There's a rubber grommet right there, and I'm running both of those wires to either go through that one or this one here. This is where the speedometer cable actually came out of. So if you remove the speedometer cable, which we don't need anymore. You could go through there, but this one is hidden a little bit more, so I wanted to run both of those through there. All right, I should have all my connections hooked up here to the control box. So I kind of put a zip tie here just to kind of keep some of the wires together and somewhat organized, but for the most part, it's just going to get shoved up above the gas pedal here, and we'll get that thing mounted up there. And then I should be able to put the dash in, and we can probably test it out. All right, well, everything should be tied up underneath and put in place, so I should be able to put the display on now. Gauge cluster. This is always fun when there's no seat in here. All we got to do is hook up our Cat 5 on the back. Kind of feed it into the dash a little bit there. And some of these other wires out of the way. I ended up moving my Holley Terminator X display. I used to sit down here by the shifter. It's going to be mounted up here now. All right, what did I do with the screwdriver? There we go. And you'll see why the screen there got moved from down by the shifter in the next video. But for now, we'll get this mounted up here. And we should be able to wrap up kind of the top part here and check it out, see how this thing looks. Seems to be fitting in here pretty good. Where is my light? Just kind of want to make sure it's sitting flat, not up against any connectors in the back. Looks pretty good. I think you guys know how satisfying it is to pull this plastic off the screen. Get that fresh glass there. Just stick it right there for now. One thing different about this gauge cluster 2 is the other one, the glass was on the outside here, kind of, I don't know how you want to say it, flat here, where this one is dished in a little bit, so the glass is more straight, it's not angled. So it'll be a little bit deeper in there, but it should look pretty good though. So far, so good. And I don't remember if I mentioned it too, but one thing on the display too that's kind of a nice option that they added to it is on the old one, the speedometer went to 140. This one goes to 160. And then also on the tack, the old one redlined at 6. This one is 6.5. And then it goes up to 8 on this one on the tack. So that's just kind of nice that they added that little extra and kind of updated it. So, but let's, now that that's mounted, make sure that Cat 5 is looking okay. I want to move that just a little bit. Okay. All right, let's get the bezel. All right, got the bezel here. Get this set on. See how it looks. We'll have to get these switches kind of hooked up just to be able to test this out. So get it somewhat loosely mocked up. Okay. It appears to be lining up nice. And now if I can find those screws, let's see, where did I put them? Ow! Son of a bitch. That hurt. Okay. These top ones are kind of tight to get into because the windshield's right there, but all right, let's see what else we got here. I think this is the right socket. Yep. Okay. Get the third one down here. There. I'm curious if I got enough gap here for my Terminator X. Oh yeah. That'll be a beaut. That just mounts right there. Push that cable in. Hopefully it stays there. That's just held on by two-sided tape. Enough gap along there. I just got to pull these cables out. Of course, they don't give us quite enough space to get in there. But we'll try everything out before we go pushing this stuff in there, because these connectors are a pain to get off. Yeah, I think that's the right way. Okay. And we get our other one connected here. Okay. All right, let's test it out here. All the lights kind of come on. It's got the clock there. If you can see that, I don't know if it's kind of blurry. It's not showing up very well. And it's telling me set fuel sender. That's where it's lit up. Sorry about the reflection, but it's brand new glass, so I think that looks good. You got left turn, right turn. Once you put the headlights on, and you got high beam, low beam. What else do we have? Looks like it's about 12 volts there, which should be right. I got to set the fuel sender and the speedometer, but we'll go through some of the calculations here. I'll have to read through that, and then hopefully it should be good. All right, guys, you can see I got the fuel sender working now. The other thing I'll have to calibrate is the speedometer. I'll have to actually take it on the road to do that. There's a couple different ways. You just got to read through the menu as far as how to do that. I'll most likely use my phone with a GPS app or speedometer speed app, and then just set it that way. But I'll have to go through that once I get it on the road, get insurance on it. But I think everything else is working here. This thing actually has some really nice options, and it's got 0 to 60 speed on it that you can play around with. It's got a 1/4 mile time and 1/4 mile speed on there. It's also got like some high, you can have a tach warning light hit. So if you want to set the tach warning light at 5 or something like that, 5,000, you can hook it up to a tach light. It's also got the high speed recording on here. There's a whole bunch of different stuff in here, different ways of setting this up. So, all right, I'm going to fire this thing up, see if all the gauges are working, and check and see if we got any coolant leaks or oil leaks. So, haven't fired this thing up yet this year, so we'll see what happens. Looks like battery is working, oil pressure is working, jack is working. Check to make sure there's no fuel leaks or coolant leaks. I'm going to do it by temp starting to come up. Got about 107 on there, just above 100. So both the Holley and the Dakota Digital sensors are reading about the same. So that's good. I realize this isn't a cheap upgrade. This gauge cluster can be pretty expensive, whether you're going with Autometer, Dakota Digital, anyone else. This can get pretty spendy, but for me, this was a definite upgrade, and I think it was well worth the money. The amount of things that this thing can do now, the way it looks, I think it looks way better in the car. Just the interior upgrade. Lately I've been doing upgrades with the Ranger interior and in here too. Just makes for the driving experience way better and more enjoyable. So if you can spare it, I think it's well worth it. But that'll do it for this time, guys. I appreciate you watching, following along. So until next time, we'll see you later.